when you start thinking about innovation, we got to innovate across the whole spectrum, right? It's not just creating new companies. We got to think about pedagogy. How do we teach better? How do we reach our students better?
How does UH Tech Bridge fit into that?
UH Tech Bridge is an experiment, right? Mm-hmm. It's an experiment in trying to build on what the university does really well. We create solutions for challenging problems. That happens through our engineering schools. It happens through our science programs. We also have an incredibly powerful group within our Bauer School of Business, the entrepreneurship program. They have been doing this, whether it's tech entrepreneurship, whether they've been doing hard entrepreneurship, whether they've been doing social entrepreneurship. They've been the world leaders at this. So trying to turn around and say, how do we take these two assets and start to make that transition to providing solutions?
Welcome to Forging the Future, and I'm excited to be here today at the U of H Tech Bridge speaking with Ramanan Krishnamoorti, the VP of Energy and Innovation.
Chris, thank you so much for being here at the University of Houston's Tech Bridge.
I'm happy to be back at U of H. It's my alma mater for 40 years ago, but hey, we won't talk about that. Well, you've been here for 28 years now, right?
This is my 28th year here, and it's been a journey. So.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So tell me, how did you get here?
Well, I'm a chemical engineer by training. When you want to come and play in chemical engineering, when you want to do something interesting, you go to the place where the problems are interesting, right? Houston has been the chemicals capital for not just the US, but for the world. It was legendary in terms of the kinds of challenges that you've got here and how do you address it. So this was mid-90s. Big sort of opportunity to come back and see that Houston had its real challenges with the energy challenges. It was coming out of it, and it was really starting to look up in terms of where the energy industry was going, especially on the downstream chemical side. My own area of research was in the area of polymers, plastics, and plastics was going through a massive revolution at that point. We just found a new way of making all kinds of cheap, inexpensive, and yet long-lasting plastics, like the polyethylenes and the polypropylenes. We found really cool ways to make those. And Houston was leading all of that. And to add to that, I sort of looked around and said, okay, if I come to the University of Houston, is it going to be a crowded place? Me as a chemical engineer, am I just going to be drowned by all these really big professors, big sort of thought leaders? Turned out that there was nobody at the University of Houston who was doing work on plastics.
Really?
Looked a little bit further out, nobody at Rice. And then looked a little bit farther out, Texas A&M, Prairie View A&M, UT, minimal work. Right? And so almost everything that was there was happening outside of this ecosystem. And so it was a perfect place for me to come in and engage on what was absolutely the best time for work in plastics and sort of the new field of nanotechnology that was coming in. And so we sort of married plastics and nanotechnology. And that was really where my career sort of blossomed in Houston. It could have happened only here and nowhere else.
Where were you coming from at that point in time?
I came from upstate New York. I was in Ithaca, New York, Cornell. And previous to that, I'd been on the West Coast at Caltech, and prior to that at Princeton along the East Coast. So both East and West Coast, never the middle of the country. And this was where my first job was. And so I came here and really absolutely enjoyed the intellectual stimulation that came from the industry, from where the applications were, and really drove my research to heights that I could have never, ever achieved anywhere else.
So you saw a gap. You came here and there wasn't anything here in your area of interest. And so you decided to come here and actually create that yourself.
Exactly.
And you came as a teacher, or
I
as
came in as a professor
Mm-hmm.
of assistant professor of chemical engineering,
Okay.
and then worked my way up through chemical engineering. And in 2005, the administrative bug hit me. So a couple of my mentors said, go be an administrator, learn how to help others, not just yourself. So I became associate dean for research in the College of Engineering. So I've started to see how research could be much more broad, much more impactful, and then sort of worked and became department chair and sort of chemical engineering. And to my sort of chagrin, I found out that we are in the energy capital of the world. We've got a fantastic engineering school. We've got fantastic chemical engineering, and yet we didn't have a petroleum engineering undergraduate program. All we had was a master's in petroleum engineering. So at that point, we as a university sort of created an undergraduate degree in petroleum engineering. This was right when the shale revolution was happening, right? So incredible time. The book hadn't been written on how to do the shale plays. We wrote the book of how to teach students how to really work in the shale plays. That's something that came out of chemical engineering. We created a new program in petroleum engineering. It's now a full-fledged department. It's sort of become one of our star departments at the university. That's where I got to learn everything about energy. And so research, energy, that's where I got to learn all of these things. So,
well, why do you think that gap existed? I mean, I'm surprised that this didn't exist before, right?
Well, yeah.
I mean, so being the oil capital of the world at the time, right?
Well, we've been down that path, right? Mm-hmm. So early 60s, 70s, we did have a petroleum engineering undergraduate program. But when sort of the 70s that bust happened, many universities shut down their petroleum engineering programs, and we were one of those. And so it was almost 35 years after that there was this newfound sort of a resurgence in this field, and we heard the industry speak loudly. And they said, "You're the largest public university. Get with it. We need you to get with this, not just to produce the workforce, but actually produce the knowledge that we need in order for us to really be able to come back and do the work that'll help the broader public." So these kinds of gaps exist in everything that we do in higher ed. It's sort of listening to where the need is, where the community speaks for and says, here's where our biggest needs are. Go adapt. Go figure out how to come back and provide a solution. And that was my first experience of doing this. And it's sort of been the place where we've sort of learned from and said, this is how we're going to have to really revolutionize the way higher ed participates in providing solutions for societal challenges.
Has that typically been something that higher ed has struggled with, and that they aren't listeners and more talkers, or what's different here?
We tend to talk a lot. We tend to love our own voice, right? And you can tell that from this podcast. Right? We love our own voice. Yeah. We can keep talking about stuff. But sometimes, the best things happen when higher ed folks do one of two things. They listen carefully to where the outside public says, this is where we really need your input. This is where we need you to put your thinking hats on and deliver. And the second is where we learn how to do rather than just talk. Some of the biggest engineering achievements, whether it's in technology, whether it's in this hard tech space, they've happened where we've come back and really delivered by doing things rather than just by talking about it.
Because I remember back in my college days, it was like, well, universities are not like vocational schools. We're not training them to do or be anything. We're just here to give a general education, and the rest is up to the student. But it seems that that's changed a little bit.
Well, no, I think very much, we want those 3 C's, right? We want people to be able to be critical thinkers. We want them to be able to communicate what they're thinking and to also collaborate. And so those three C's will never go away from anything that we do in terms of how we prepare our students. There are a couple other C's that are important too, right? How do you create that's a really, really important part of this knowledge that you're gaining, of this critical thinking, and being able to communicate, be able to collaborate. You need to be able to create. And the other one that I think is really integral to where we are as a society is be cyber aware, right? Be really know where that whole digital space, that whole space of the computer knowledge, that ability to integrate that into the way you think is going to be a critical piece. We see that with AI. We see all of that happening now. It's part of that same that DNA that we have. I don't think we go away from those 3 C's. I think we add a couple more C's, and I think it really makes a difference in terms of the way we approach and deliver to challenges that society it really wants us to deliver.
You mentioned AI, and I want to touch on that a little bit because I see a little bit of, schools being afraid of AI and how the impact is on education. Maybe a small parallel is like the calculator, right? We have to do everything by hand, or the students aren't going to really understand it, and we're not going to allow calculators in the classroom. But, I think that, like you're saying, you really need to embrace what's available on computers.
I completely agree with you, right? And I think higher ed, and it's actually very, very broadly speaking, education has to embrace this idea of AI. How do we make it a partner rather than make it the enemy? That's critical. That's part of everything that we need to do. And I think that's where we need to have a different way of thinking. And that's, I think, integral to the way we've taken it upon ourselves at the University of Houston. We've actually said, let's embrace it. Let's find the best pedagogy that we can put forth using AI rather than fighting AI. And it's really, I think this is going to be the big differentiator, is how do you create your next generation of students who are ready to think and be challenged by AI.
I think that's how the challenge, right? Is like, well, we've always done it this certain way. Oh, students always have a blue book, and they need to write in the journal, and they need to take their tests that way. But it's like, well, wait a minute, that worked 50 years ago, but maybe we need to do something else now.
We need to do something else, and we need to learn from what the marketplace tells us, right? So part of this is where we've been very, very creative with even many of the educational programs that we put together. We turn around and say, we can do 4-year degrees, right? But most of the times, by the time you graduate, the degree that you started off with is no longer the deliverer of solutions or even of your excitement that you went into a particular degree. So if you're lucky, you finish in 4. If you're unlucky, you perhaps take 6, 7, 8 years. And by that point, almost everything you've learned is perhaps pointless in the grand scheme of being able to get that first job, be able to go and deliver value back in that first job. So how do we skill up people as they are ready to graduate? So we turned around and said, we really need to be able to provide a just-in-time education of knowledge and skills, both knowledge and skills, because this is important, right? Even when you are in higher ed, even when you get through higher ed, knowledge is important, but the way it becomes relevant is through skills that you can demonstrate when you get into the workplace. So we have to be able to give that just-in-time knowledge and skills for people who come out when they graduate. And the other side that we've also noticed is that almost any job that you're in today, 3 to 5 years, you're technologically obsolete, right? You pick any field, whether you pick petroleum engineering, whether you pick chemical engineering, whether you pick electrical engineering, whether you pick social work, whether you pick journalism, between 3 and 5 years, you're essentially, if you've not kept up with where the technology, where that particular field is going forward, you're obsolete.
Well, that's always been true, I think, in software and technology space, and it's starting to be the other domains, right? I always talk about, like, in my career in software and engineering, it's like drinking from a fire hose, right? And you need to keep doing it. My DOS skills and basic skills are not doing me any good anymore. And constant learning, you have to keep learning that next language, that next technology. Okay, now am I going to use AI, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Right?
You absolutely hit the nail on the head, right? So when I was growing up, the rite of passage was, could you hold up that Fortran punch card and read it, right?
Yeah.
What good is that skill today? None of us use a Fortran. Actually, most people who listen to this podcast would sit there and say, what is a punch card?
Yeah.
They're probably going and Googling that right now.
Yeah, Google Hollerith card. Maybe you'll find what we're talking about. Yeah, that was my first and only programming class at U of H, was programming on paper punch cards, the Hollerith card.
It's part of it is those skills, that knowledge has to get re-upped every few years. So what we decided was nobody's going to go back and do a traditional degree. They're going to want to learn these skills, and they're going to learn these skills just in time as they make those pivots in careers. So whether it's data analytics, whether it's AI, whether it's robotics, whether it is carbon capture, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's ESG, right? All of these types of, or risk analysis, all of these, not just hard technology programs, but even programs on regulation, policy, safety. Those are things that people are going to take just in time. They're going to do it in their spare time. So they need to be bite-sized. But coming from a university, when you put that university logo there, it better have quality, right? And so how do we make sure that it has academic rigor? How do we make sure that that seal means something, is something that we take very, very seriously? But we found these micro-credentialing programs are incredibly powerful. They're powerful in the sense that they provide that knowledge, they provide those skills, they provide those immediately translatable skills in their workplace where they can see the value immediately. And it's got rigor to it. And so it builds on something that they already know. And that's been something that we've truly valued, and sort of we picked this up during the pandemic. We sort of started getting into it, and that's really grown for us as a mechanism to engage and educate the next generation.
The micro-credentialing.
Yeah. So when you talk about, when you start thinking about innovation, how do we start to do these things? This is kind of, we got to innovate across the whole spectrum, right? It's not just creating new companies. We got to think about pedagogy. How do we teach better? How do we reach our public better? How do we reach our students better?
Speaking of which, how does UH Tech Bridge fit into that?
Yeah, so UH Tech Bridge is an experiment, right? It's an experiment in trying to build on what the university does really well, which is we create solutions for challenging problems. That happens through our engineering schools. It happens through our science programs. We also have an incredibly powerful group within our Bauer School of Business, the entrepreneurship program. They have been doing this, whether it's tech entrepreneurship, whether they've been doing hard entrepreneurship, whether they've been doing social entrepreneurship. They've been the world leaders at this. So try to turn around and say, how do we take this? How do we take these two assets and start to make that transition to providing solutions to what society wants as a commercial solution? That's really what this Tech Bridge is all about. So so this was an old Schlumberger facility that we inherited. We didn't inherit, we bought it in 2008 with the notion that we really want to find ways where we can start doing things at scale and provide solutions at scale. So we got, in addition to what you will see here in the innovation side of things, we have a couple sort of unique things out here at the university. We have an engine testing lab here where we can test large-scale trucks, large buses, and look at the emissions profile for them. We did this with diesel engine vehicles to start off. Then we went to natural gas vehicles. Today, we do that with electric vehicles, right? So we have the ability to sort of transform what we do with sort of testing and being able to provide that knowledge back to where the commercial vendors can actually start thinking about it. We also have a very unique thing. Our university has been known for superconductivity for a long time, high temperature superconductivity.
I think even back in the 80s, maybe.
Back in the 80s, exactly.
Yeah.
Now we actually manufacture superconductor wire here at this site. So, and 1/3 of the country's superconductor wire is manufactured on this campus.
Wow.
Okay. So it's a very, very unique facility. It's a roll-to-roll manufacturing facility. When you start to think about it, that's how you make large-scale commercial product. These guys that do that, they do inline quality control, be able to come back and show that. That's very unique for a university to do. And part of this is where we look at this tech bridge, this innovation center, to turn around and say, how do we create an ecosystem that allows entrepreneurs, that looks at innovators, provides them a platform to come, cohabitate with others with similar backgrounds, learn from each other, learn from subject matter experts, and then for us to provide common services. Now, it's very easy to provide sort of desk space and get office incubators.
And
those
hope
happen,
something might happen.
right?
Yeah.
And hope something happens. We've got that. We've got that part, but we added a second component to this, which is really created a lab incubator. And these are wet lab spaces where you actually can come in, do hardcore chemical work, do hardcore biological work, do it in a safe environment where you know it's going to be safe. You can come rent from as little as a single bench to an entire private lab where you can have manufacturing that you can do there. And that's really what we've created here. And so we provide all the services. For instance, all the chemical cleanup services, all of that is taken care of. We look at their safety so that you don't have to come back and have a safety officer for it. We also provide the umbilical back to the university where they can come in and use all the core facilities at the university. Those are kinds of things that, multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment that you normally couldn't get access to. That's how these ideas sort of build on and grow, is through those unique pieces of equipment where they can go test stuff. We make it available to them, not just the equipment, but also the people who do it.
And who is them? I mean, is it faculty trying to get research out and can commercialize it? Is it students that are currently enrolled at U of H? Is it startups that just want to say, hey, I want to come use your space? Or is it all the above?
It's all of the above,
okay,
with one important caveat, right? We don't do this as a real estate play. We want to find a way where there is a natural synergy with the university, because that's where we can then find avenues for our students to engage, our faculty to engage, for the startups to engage back with our faculty and students. So we've got faculty-driven startups, and those are sort of the places where we've got an incredible pool of intellectual property that comes out of our faculty's research labs. We do about 35 to 40 patents a year. You start to build that up over a 20-year profile. You've got a huge portfolio of patents that lead to licensing and licensing income. That's typically when they mature sufficiently. So we start to look at how do we create those faculty startups. We do student startups, right? So we do a whole bunch of student competitions that drive them to start thinking about, how do I take these ideas that beautiful in an ivory tower, now get into the real world where it's dirty, where there's uncertainty, where there's incomplete information, and now start to say, how am I going to make this work in the commercial space? So we run these competitions. We force the nerd engineers and scientists to engage with business students, with law school students, with architecture students, because you need them to come together and then look at this and say, how do I solve a very complex challenge? The technology might be easy, but adoption of it, how do I make a business work? I need to know what the competition is, what the playing field looks like, and then be able to provide that sort of answer that really means something in the commercial sphere. That's where we've sort of very, very deliberately forced these teams together. Many of these might have graduate students and undergraduate business students. One of the sort of smart things I think one of my predecessors started, and we've been sort of building on, has been this idea of taking many of these intellectual properties, these patents or patent applications that we've got, and said, it's been sitting around for a couple of years. We're not seeing a whole lot of commercial interest. Give it to our best and brightest entrepreneurship students, right? Our Wolf Center for Entrepreneurship has 40 students a year who are looking for business plan ideas to build a business plan around. We give it to them and say, listen, work with this faculty member and build a business plan around it. You build it, we'll help you now start to take it into the commercialization sphere. So both of those, and then we've got some incredible partners that come from outside, right?
That's what I was going to ask next. I mean, how are you engaging externally with those commercial providers that are interested in that?
Exactly. So part of this, we come back and say, ask an entity like Underwriters Lab. right? We all know UL. We've seen this on the bulbs and toasters. Then they certify everything, every piece of consumer equipment that we all use in terms of electrical equipment. They were looking to create a research entity in the energy capital. They wanted to really create something on batteries here. So we went, engaged with them, brought them here to the Tech Bridge, said, we've got a lot of expertise in looking at non-traditional battery systems. Our faculty have grown some incredible research programs that are looking at non-lithium based batteries. So things like sodium ion batteries, things that flow chemistry batteries, and said, we've got that expertise. We know that you're looking for something where we can test these batteries, validate that, and make sure that they are safe. Why don't you come and cohabitate with us in this Tech Bridge? And so they're one of the big tenants that we've got here. And they sort of provide that glue between our faculty startups, and that next piece of it, which is when it comes out of U of H, when it comes out of the Tech Bridge, it will be safe, it'll be fun, and it'll have the UL stamp, hopefully, when it gets out there.
Are there more commercial partners besides UL here?
So we've got multiple partners. We've got about 28 different companies here. I'd say about 60% of them are, and that's in the wet lab space. If you bring in the office incubator, it's more like 40. But 60% of them are UH faculty or student-led. The others are primarily coming from outside. We're very happy to bring in anybody who has got an interest to engage with the university. So, for instance, Rice University, Matteo Pasquale had a fantastic company which he was looking at carbon fiber generation and making fibers out of it. He was looking for space where he could go and do this work. He needed to be close to a university where he could engage with students. We gave him space. We said, come and do the work here. Likewise, a colleague of ours from UT Austin, he was looking for space where they got new battery technology. They wanted to find a home in Houston. Again, everybody wants to find a foothold in Houston. We said, great, bring it on. Come work with us. And this company came, incubated here with us for about 2 years. They just left because they outgrew the Tech Bridge, which is exactly what we want them to do.
You're doing a lot of things new now, right? And you're focusing on innovation. And how do you foster innovation both at Tech Bridge and across the university?
And I think it's a terrific question. And it really comes back to something that University of Houston does all the time, right? We hold our secrets near and dear to our heart. So, and this is not the first time. Like, even when you talk about our athletics program, or you start asking the question about our opera program, or about our music programs, or about our architecture programs, or about our entrepreneurship programs, or about our social entrepreneurship programs, every single one of these is a beautifully kept secret on this campus. Mentioned to you, Wolf Center for Entrepreneurship, 40 students each year. I want to put those numbers in the context of the University of Houston, right? We teach 47,000 students on an annual basis. As a system of universities across the UH system, we teach over 75,000 students here. Over 50% of the graduates entering the workforce in the greater Houston region come out of the University of Houston system, right? So this is the kind of the powerhouse that we've got. But how many of those kids actually get training in innovation and entrepreneurship? A very small fraction. We've got to change that, because what we need is a different way of solving problems, complex, challenging problems, where, yes, critical thinking is important, collaboration is important, communication is important, but you got to be able to come back, innovate, find new ways to get solutions. And perhaps do this by doing something, right? Learn to do at the same time as learning to think. That's part of what we're trying to do here. We've got the innovation, this Tech Bridge, which has got the innovation center. It touches a very small number of people. We need to be able to touch a much larger number of students on campus. I would say, if you think about a student spending 4 years on average on campus, if we touch 10,000 of them any given year, then we've got the right size and scale. That's really what we're trying to do here.
So instead of like
campus.
40 entrepreneur students, what you're saying is you want to somehow, how do you touch 75,000 students with some amount of innovation or some amount of entrepreneurship? Does that mean like adding like a course to those degree plans, or getting them just more involved in what's going on at TechBridge?
I think it's all of the above. I think not necessarily adding courses, but how do you inculcate, how do you integrate innovation, entrepreneurship into the way they are learning and into the way they learn. And so that's part of my mission now, is to find ways to do that, and finding those sort of easy solutions that you can start to incorporate. One way to do this is through a makerspace, right? And so we're creating an innovation hub on campus. This is going to be right in the middle of campus, right next to the library, where we want to put a makerspace there, which is accessible to any and all students.
Where's that going? The Cullen College of Engineering, or
no? It's going to be right where the old College of Technology, the annex was. We're tearing that down and putting an innovation hub building there.
Interesting.
It's going to host all of our maker space. It's going to host all of our entrepreneurship spaces. So the Wolf Center, Red Labs, the SURE program, engineering entrepreneurship, all of them would be housed there, so that they could actually come have that common place where they can engage and do work. So the idea of really trying to create this maker spaces, give people the ability to start thinking about how do you do it, and how do you showcase it, right? So it's going to be designed in a way where we take the students' work and make it available, present it to people as they walk by the place, they see these creations, right? And so that's one part of the solution. We think that that's only a part of the solution. Big barriers to entry in terms of people coming and using maker spaces. So we're starting to engage with faculty and students across the university, saying, how do we start to break into it? Can we create, for instance, a couple different ways of thinking about it, integrate it into courses, but also then start to think about experiential learning? Can we create those experiential learning opportunities where we can use those resources for students' learning? And then really integrate it into, for instance, capstone courses, where you can really do some very complicated and interesting things as part of that learning. So that's one way to think about it. The other is really turning on and bringing to the fore the opportunities to start thinking about how do you create commercial establishment, whether it's in hard tech, whether it's in soft tech, be able to come back and find all those connectivities. For instance, how do I get the business community? How do I get people who can tell you where the lowest hanging fruit challenges are? Yeah. How do I find people who can tell me, how do I get the money to do this? How do I figure out all my competition in this space? Perhaps the hardest thing, how do I navigate the legal processes of actually making this happen, having an establishment that can actually survive beyond just that founder, right? Those are the kinds of things we are trying to bring forth. We think there is a natural transition from the heart of the campus to a place like the TechBridge, where we can start, as you mature out, as you start to hit these bottlenecks, we provide you with those solution sets that you can come and adapt for your particular challenge, right? Each individual one of these entrepreneurs is, and I hate the word snowflake, but I think it is really representative of what they are. They are truly, truly, truly unique. Their sets of problems and the bottlenecks that they hit, only they will face. They need to find the solution for themselves. They can't use a roadmap, if you will, for a solution set, but giving them those possible pathways, giving them that ability to go bounce off the ideas and say, aha, here is that solution process that I can look through. That's what we're trying to really build here. That's why you see what we've tried to do. I think part of it is we've learned from our own mistakes, right? So the TechBridge has been a beautifully kept secret. And that's because I think part of our challenge is we didn't understand what the marketplace truly needed. I think that understanding is starting to really consolidate and gel for all of us. And I think we're really trying to come back and say, if the innovation entrepreneurship ecosystem in Houston has to advance and advance rapidly, the University of Houston has to drive this, has to be central to this, has to be a real critical player, because we've got the size and scale that nobody else can bring.
Besides having the #1 undergrad entrepreneurship program, right?
Well, I think that's important, but we can't rest on that, right? That we keep hitting #1 as the undergraduate entrepreneurship program, but don't connect it back to the rest of the 47,000 students. We've missed an incredible opportunity, not just for our students, not just for our university, but for this entire ecosystem.
So we've talked a lot about innovation and what you're doing here. How is University of Houston forging the future in innovation moving forward?
Yeah, it's a great question as always, Chris, and you got some great questions. So I think it's really understanding who we are and what do we uniquely deliver to this ecosystem. We are a university that is a public university, a very large public university. The social mobility of our students is very, very important, not just to them, but to all of us. Close to half our students are first generation students. They come hungry. They come hungry for success, but they are also risk averse. So we understand the challenges that are there, but we got to find ways to provide them those solutions that are truly different. And so understanding that you got to risk mitigate, you got to provide them with good solutions. And this is where we turn around and say, don't think of innovation in this one-sided, one lens that we've all started to think about, which is this idea of creating startups. Innovation can happen anywhere. It can happen anytime. And it is what gives you that innate advantage to become something truly different. And I think that's what we really want to grow. It's not this formulaic approach to turn around and say, we're going to create more startups. We're going to create a different DNA with our students, give them that ability to integrate innovation into their thinking, into their being, and then let them go and find the solutions. And for that, it's really important, right? We need to know where the challenges are. And that's where this university, this ecosystem is truly blessed. We have Houston as part of our ecosystem. This is where we take on hard challenges. We don't do them because they're easy to do. We do them because they're hard, because they're challenges that we know we can solve. Get those challenges to be presented to our students. We cannot host them in an ivory tower. And that's part of where I come in. That's where many of my colleagues come in. How do we connect our students, our faculty, to the biggest challenges that this ecosystem have, and then let them come back with the best solutions?
I love that. Well, U of H is my alma mater. I started SoftTech to solve the hard technical challenges as well. Definitely interested in helping collaborate. So I'd love to talk to you more about that at some point.
Absolutely.
Love what you're doing here. Thanks for being on the podcast today. I've got my Cougar Red socks on. They're also Star Trek Techie Engineering socks. I've got some here for you.
Well, thank you so much. Love that.
I know your background is chemistry, so we got some chemistry.
Thank you. That is awesome. You got energy. You got nuclear energy. You got microscopes. You got everything here. So
they're not Cougar Red, but I'm sure you got enough red, right?
I look at my glasses. They're red.
I saw that. I noticed that. So thanks for being on the show.
That's how I've been indoctrinated. So thank you.